This is the Weltkrieg. We're playing the Eastern Front duration game with the Caucasus duration, the Italian duration, the Macedonian duration, and the Gallipoli scenarios included. This particular video is a recap of what's been going on in the first year of the war, because we're now at the end of July 1915 and we've been going for 12 months. So if we look at the demoralisation tracks, we've got Germany on 360, Austria on 318, Russia on 583, Bulgaria on 13, Britain on 27, and the Ottoman Empire on 56. Oh, and the Italians are on 31. So the main thing you can say about this is the Russians are less than 20 demoralisation points from shaken morale. So that is not good in terms of the Russians. If we look at the overall losses, the Germans and the Austrians together have lost more than the Russians, but they haven't lost a spectacular amount. The Austrians are actually at 550s. They're shaken, so they're about 200, just short of 200 below their shaken morale situation. So that's not too bad. If we look at the war in general, the Caucasus front has been very, very quiet. There's been almost no movement from day one. The Turks have launched about 3 or 4 offensives, and apart from one, they've been all right. They've got reasonable dice rolls, but the terrain is horrendous, and attacking in winter is even worse. They only had one disastrous attack. The Russians have only attacked a couple of times, neither of which have been particularly successful, and the front is pretty much stalemate. There's not many entrenchments and things because there's a lot of mountainous hexes between the two armies here. There isn't a great deal of opportunity to make any significant breakthroughs. Supplies are at a premium, so are reinforcements, replacements coming in dribs and drabs. Unless one side really goes hell for leather and smashes itself to pieces, I can't see there's going to be a huge amount of movement here. If we go over to Gallipoli, Gallipoli started pretty much in the same way as it went historically. The British are sure, but they've launched a few attacks and they've not been successful. The Turks have launched a couple of offensives, they have not been successful. The terrain's horrible. There's trenches coming into force all over the place. So it's going to go the way it went historically, and the Allies are going to pull out fairly soon and concentrate on Macedonian front. Macedonian front itself doesn't kick off till turn 2, October 1915. I put the Greeks on the board so we can see what it is. We've got the Serbian army over here. That's what's left of the Serbian army that was evacuated from Albania. And that's ready to come in July 1916. If we look at the Serbian front, throughout the year of the war, it started off with an initial Austrian attack by 3 armies. That sort of faltered because the Russians were putting such pressure on the Austrians in Galicia that a lot of units had to be pulled off the Serbian front to Galicia. That ultimately led to a situation where the Serbians practically recaptured all the lost terrain. But as the Russian sort of attacks against the Galician front started to peter out due to pressure by the Germans and due to the fact that the Italian front came into action, the Serbians just disintegrated. Quite a few replacements and were heading to the Austrian army here, and then the Bulgarian army came in when one of these Belgrade hexes fell, and the Serbians just disintegrated and gradually were pushed further and further back, up to a point where when Skopje fell over here, that forced the Serbian army to give up and retreat into Albania. Hence it was shipped out via Jerez and is currently refitting in Corfu with the Allies. If we look at the Galicia front, Austro-Hungary started off pushing into Russia slightly, and effectively over the period they've lost all this territory. You can see the Russian border goes all the way. Look how far the Russians have pushed into Austro-Hungary. They got to a position where they were threatening Przemysl. They practically had it surrounded, this fortress here. But as the army gradually moved into the Carpathians here, the terrain got worse. It's more difficult to attack, and the offensive started to grind to a halt, particularly when the Germans started putting a lot of pressure in Poland. So although the Austrians have been pushed back, this part of the front is pretty static now. It's only here that the Austrians have started pushing the Russians back, because the Russians become so weak due to their commitments in Poland. If we look at Prussia, the Russians captured a huge area of Prussia early on in the war, and they've never really relinquished it because the Prussians have made no effort to attack in Prussia at all. They've been concentrating all their effort in Poland, where there was very little in terms of trench lines or troops. So it's pretty static along this front, but it's not well guarded. Any of these hexes here with these core markers in, there's hardly any units guiding them. Admittedly, it's all trenched, but it wouldn't be difficult to break through. One of the reasons the Germans never managed to recover Prussia was the fact that I made a mistake with the Western Front reinforcements. I didn't bring them in at the correct time, and they ended up coming in on February the 15th, and they ended up being committed into Poland rather than into Prussia as they were historically. So that really explains why the front is like that. And also, the Germans in reality wouldn't have let the Russians keep hold of this huge area of territory they've got. They would have been under massive pressure to recapture that. If we look at the most active front at the moment, it's Poland. Now, this huge area of Poland that's been taken from the Russians, admittedly there was very little in terms of troops committed to Poland at the start of the game. Really, the Austrian armies were deployed up to about here, and the Germans over here. So there's a huge gap in the middle where not much happened. Early on in the war, the Germans did capture Lodz, but then the Russians recaptured it, and eventually the sort of front went along a line of about here, but then the Germans have been concentrating massive attacks, which has dragged Russian reinforcements off the Galician front, which in turn removed the pressure on the Austrians, and so the Austrians were able to send troops to Serbia, which resulted in the Serbians getting stomped. So the front here is bending, but it isn't breaking. There's some, you've got the Vistula in Warsaw here is difficult not to crack, and there's some decent defensive terrain here, but the Russians are still under a lot of pressure, and because their morale is just about to go into a shaken state, their powers of resistance are going to drop. The big thing that's keeping Russia in this war is the huge amount of replacements. They can keep taking lots of losses, because at the bare minimum they get 133 replacement on an odd month. Sorry, on an even month. On an odd month they get 233 replacements. So that's enabled them to keep their army virtually up to full strength, even though it's badly stretched over this huge front. The other area of the game that's going on is the Italian front. Now, the Italian front, when it first came into existence, the idea it was really to take pressure off the Serbians, and it did take a lot of pressure off the Serbians. It stopped the Austrians from really conducting much in the way of attacks in Serbia, and left the Bulgarians to mop at what was left of the Serbians. And a lot of units were pulled off the Galician front and the Serbian front to actually form some sort of line where they could stop the Italian initial attacks. The Italians made some decent progress, probably more than they should have done, because I should have counted for stiffened morale in these hexes, which I haven't done. I keep forgetting to do that. But the line is now fairly static. A lot of it's not really suitable for fighting. Notice the Germans did bring an army into this position here. That's probably a bit of an extravagance, and they should consider pulling that back to Germany for deployment into Poland. So if we look at the war after a year, it's not looking good for the Entente, really. With Serbia out of the game and Russia beginning to shake, especially if the Germans can pull a lot of units off the Western Front, it's going to be dire straits for Russia. The Austrians, they're really pretty much at full stretch. They're not in a position to get any more sort of reinforcements at this stage, and they're gonna be hard pressed on the Italian front and fighting on the Galician front as well. So that's it. That is the situation at the end of the first year of the war.